Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and together with Steve Lefkowitz, we bring you a good show. Steve, you always have something interesting to discuss. What do we have for today?
Well, today I'd like to discuss, an issue that's really facing the American Jewry or even world Jewry, and I think we should discuss the future and what are the problems, the pros and cons that American Jewry is facing. Not only here in the United States, but in the world. I mean, because you're always hearing about the declining numbers of Jews, especially here in the United States, and especially the high assimilation rate.
And it's interesting, you're talking about United States and the world. Let's maybe start with the Capital District, really, because I'm not from this area, and I came into this area, so a little bit I'm going to have to give a little bit of a history that what people have told me, not from personally, but
right.
Maybe when you moved in about 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, there was 2 butcher shops, kosher butcher shops. We're down to 1 now. So people would say, if, something 40, 50 years ago, there was like 10, but what is this, 5? Again, maybe don't quote me on the numbers because, like I say, I wasn't there at that time, but there's like 5 even in Troy. And Troy is not the strongest Jewish neighborhoods now in the Capital District. And Cohoes had 1, and they say just so many people say the different kosher areas, and now we're down to 1. So with those numbers, you would say, well, that's a pretty steep decline. That means that less people are keeping kosher. And it probably is the truth because of that. On the other hand, and this is a very big other hand, and that's why I say what's happening in Albany is really, I think, again, exactly
like a microcosm?
A microcosm, a little bit, because of a lot of areas. Maybe we'll talk about New York City and other bigger areas differently, but around the country where the general mood, and you just said yourself that intermarriage rate, you're talking sometimes you'll see reports 50%, 60%, they'll say some small communities it's 70. Again, because simply in New York City, the odds are bumping into another Jewish person is greater than if you're in the middle of, Vermont or whatever have you, that, even people tell me here we are in Delmar and say, well, we have a very strong, not strong, they won't say, but we have a significant, maybe we'll use that word, Jewish enrollment in the public schools. What is it? 10%. Well, that's a lot better than, I talked to some people in Voorheesville and some Jewish kids. They say, oh, how many Jews? I said, well, I know but 2 kids. 2 kids, the kid knows 2 kids in his whole, and at high school. I mean, so, but 10%, even then, what's the 10%? I mean, 90% are non-Jewish and 10%. Again, what are your odds of just bumping into some of you in your class? You have 30 kids in the class. That means 3 kids out of 30 are going to be Jewish. So just that, meeting other people, other kids, obviously it is in numbers. If you're 50%, 70%, like SUNY Albany, a third is Jewish, well, obviously the odds are New York City. The odds are that you're going to meet someone Jewish more than if you're like 10% or you're 3 kids in a whole class, unless you keep up a strong identity. But there is another hand, really, to that of the other hand, because we could say just on almost like an X in a certain sense. Someone explained it that, because one hand is going greatly on a decline, as we say, with the number of butcher shops, and not just the butcher shops, but I think it's really like a keynote of the idea of what's really happening. We could talk about the synagogues, also how they've been merging throughout the years. I mean, I guess in recent history you haven't seen that, but I mean, all these synagogues are really, I know in Troy and in Albany, Bethel, they're just a merging of different synagogues, and still they're not any great numbers. Even they merge, you think they have double the population, they merge because then they're still small. But one hand, there is a big plus factor here. What is it? It's not maybe so much in quantity, but you'll see it in the dedication. Maybe we could use that word. Meaning because the people who are keeping kosher, the younger people, if they're into kosher, they're dedicated to keeping kosher. I'll give you an example. The Hagaloo was a kosher butcher shop in
Albany,
Albany, and he closed. So I knew him at that time. So this is a person, middle-aged, told me, I've been keeping kosher. I've been going to Hagaloo my whole life, 20, 30, 40, or whatever it was. And, well, he's closing up. I guess I'm not going to keep kosher anymore. I says, well, what does that have to do with anything? You don't want to keep kosher because, well, this was my favorite butcher shop. I knew the person, Mr. Siegel, and I knew the place. And if he's not there, well, I guess that's it, Now, that's not a reason to keep kosher because your favorite, maybe you may like your butcher,
Right.
but just because your butcher's not there anymore to give up keeping kosher, obviously that's what we're not saying is that's commitment, and that's really conducive of really the older people. It was more like tradition, and if it was convenient, and he's the guy around the corner, and I know him, he's such a nice man. They're all very nice and convenient, but on the other
Right.
hand, where's the commitment? And the younger person, and now it isn't so easy. I know you live near to the kosher market there on Central Avenue at the Price Chopper and Colony. But on the other hand, for
Right.
Schenectady, Albanians, and Trojans, it's 20, 25 minutes just to get a little meat for dinner. You know, I mean, it is a
Right.
long schlep. I know for myself, I know for everybody else. It's, you know, there's other Price Choppers in Grand Union. There's other supermarkets a lot closer to than that. So it's a little bit of a commitment. So there is more of a commitment in nowadays in keeping kosher.
All right, but I can understand that. But let's take the numbers, the idea. You're always reading the paper. You're saying, oh, I see like...
It's a negative thing, and it really should shake people. And I'm surprised it doesn't. Those are the ads. I mean, they do it to shake people up. You know,
Right.
that's what, you know, doctors say, you know, here's a person with a stroke and a heart attack. They want to shake you up. They want to move you a little bit that way. And these are Jewish shock ads that I know Federation and other Jewish organizations puts out because, you know, people say, okay, you know, I'll give my kid a Jewish education, maybe for a few years at 10. And they're playing with fires. You know, so what is as a parent who's obviously in charge of their own children,
Right.
what are your goals Jewishly for your child? And for the most part, people will answer, well, of course, I want them to be a good Jew. Well, what does that mean? Well, you know, Jewish life, I would like them to marry another Jewish person, have some context. And really, it's not that much variance in Reform Conservative. They participate in the synagogue, whatever, you know, section it is, and, you know, be involved in certain ways. Well, that's usually the canned answer, what people would answer you. On the other hand, it's Russian roulette. Russian roulette. Why? Because if you don't give your child a committed Jewish education and something to go on, well, these numbers, we're not prophets. I mean, these are numbers that they're projected. The child is going to be, the odds are they're going to be intermarried. And just, we say they're 50, 60, 70%. And besides that, go beyond that, then the grandchildren,
Right.
that they're even more diluted, their education. It's like, so you want Jewish grandchildren, don't you? Well, just the odds are almost against you. And
Right.
people, it should shake people up. Well, you know, you're going up a mountain, so to speak.
Because you always hear that a lot of people join the synagogue until their child, son or daughter.
Before that, when did they sign up? When their child was 8, 9, 10 years old? Now, I see an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, and of course I'm a rabbi, and I like talking about Judaism with the child.
Right.
Now, they know every TV show. And they're 8, 9, 10, but they could they can get a PhD in TV shows. They
Right.
know every actor and movie and, you know, whatever's on the scene, the latest thing. They know
Right.
everything about that, the latest movies and Pocahontas, whatever's coming up.
Right.
You know, that they know 100%. And they're good students. They're Jewish students. So they're good students. Come to Judaism, you know, they're 8, 9, and 10. I don't want to say it's all over with, but their personalities are fixed. And you say, well, let's be Jewish. They say, well, this is odd to me. I never heard of this. This is so different than anything I've gone to. I go to public school, and you get children that, unfortunately, I mean, not all the time, but again, it's Russian roulette. Who is going to count on that your child's going to be the one who, you know, takes to Judaism after 10 years old? There are a lot of them are just turned off simply at 10 years old. I mean, you think you have to 18, 20, 30 years old. You get a kid 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and you tell them about Judaism, they don't want to hear from it.
But why are people, yeah, I'm just going to say, but why are people like a
that this rabbi came up with is very interesting to understand a little
Right.
bit. He makes fun of the Jewish community this way. This was a rich man, and he invited rich man. He had servants and butlers and maids. And
Right.
one day he was going to invite the poor people of his town or a number
Uh-huh.
of people to his table and to his feast. And every time he wanted something, he says, anybody who wants anything,
Right.
he rings a little bell on his table, ding, 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 and the maid comes, yes, yes, sir, what can I
Right.
do? Another soup, another helping, another Coke, another l'chaim, whatever it was. And everything, he'd be ringing this bell this whole time.
Right.
And, you know, maids and butlers would beck and call, whoop, whoop, whoop. So then this rich man says to his poor people, you know, I gave you a beautiful meal. You can take anything you want. Maybe there's a gold spoon or a silver spoon, or it's a story, whatever. So this one takes a silver spoon, and this one takes a nice plate over here, you know, as a souvenir. And the other person, so this poor person said, what do you want? And the poor person says, I want the bell, that little bell on the table. So guy says, the bell? I mean, the bell, you know, what's a bell? You know, a few dollar bell compared to, I'm ready to give you a piece of silver. Take the bell. So the poor man is so happy, takes his bell. He goes home and he says, wife, he says, I'm going to make a party for everybody.
Right.
You don't have no money for this kind of business, a party for, lucky we have bread and water. No, you invite all our friends. So all right, I'm going to make a party. Invites all the friends, and it's a whole tish, you say in Yiddish, a whole table. So wife says, you know, you didn't probably no food to prepare you. We don't have money to buy the food for, I don't know what you're, all right. Everybody's seated. Now, you ready, everybody? They says, yeah, we're ready for the party. Takes out his bell, and ding, 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 ding. And nothing happens. And the poor man says, wait a minute here. Takes out the bell, ding, 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 ding. And you're getting the point already, nothing happens. And the wife says, well, what are you ringing this bell for? You said you had a party for, and you're ringing bells around here. So I don't know. I went to the rich man, and every time he rang his bell, people come run up with food, platters of food. So I thought the bell is the cause of the platters of the food. Well, I mean, it's obviously a dumb story, but I mean, it's a not true story, but actually there's a lot of truth in life to that also. And this person gives an example, and I think this is fitting. In the olden days, like we said, and talk about old Judaism, people around the corner, I don't know how many old people have told me, Rabbi, you know, I feel so Jewish. You know, when I grew up, the bakery, the butcher shop, you know, around the corner, I had a synagogue.
You just felt Jewish.
Yeah, felt Jewish, and I felt Jewish and good and Jewish, and it kept him his whole life to be married to a Jew, to feel Jewish, to belong to a Jewish synagogue. And he thinks that's all it needs, like he's going to ring the little bell, you know, the very external parts of it. There's nothing in it, and then he gives it over to his child. Now, you know, we broadcast from here from Delmar, and like I said, it's probably, as any part of the capital district, there's more Jewish people per, you know, population in Delmar probably than in any other place. I mean, there's sections in Albany, maybe but that's not all of Albany. Maybe if you're going to see sections of Niskayuna. But as a city in itself, it's probably more Jewish than a lot of areas, or surely most areas. But there's no Jewish butcher shop. There's nothing really Jewish. You know, I'm the only Jewish things around, and you know, I don't make such a big, you know, sound in the community. People know from my sukkah in front of the house. But I'm just saying, you don't feel Jewish, and then they take their kids 10, 15 minutes to their synagogue, and they ring the bell and they say, for me it was Jewish. I always felt good about being Jewish. Well, I love Jewish things. You know, I love going to Israel. But the Jewish child, then they roll and they ring the bell. Well, for you it is also, isn't it? And they says, no, why? Well, you know, remember the Jewish butcher shop and the Jewish... Kid says, I don't know, in Dalmar, we didn't have anything of that. You know, remember the grandparents? He says, well, my grandparents always spoke Yiddish. He says, our grandparents don't speak Yiddish. There's no Jewish flavor. So my Bubba always made chicken soup. The kid says... She's busy playing mahjong. I don't know from these things over here. And this is what it is. And that's why I say, I don't think people, and that's why people are not bad in that sense at all. They're not renegades. Maybe you have stories in Europe, people were renegades against Judaism. People aren't renegades at all nowadays. But the problem really is just that ringing of the bell. They think that sustained them and their grandparents to feel Jewish. They're going to give that over to their children. It just doesn't go. So all of a sudden they wake up, and it's 10 years old, like I say, and their kids are turned off. I had a parent just recently says, I got to send them to an Orthodox Jewish camp, the camp that I send my kids to. Well, you're not, you're not anything Orthodox. You're nothing, you know. I mean, they belong, you know, they work on Sabbath, no Orthodox here. I'm telling you, my kid, she says to me, she says, a year to the bar mitzvah, doesn't want to, you know, goes like everybody else, doesn't want anything to do with Judaism. And now she's got scared. So, of course, they, you know, call me to, you know, get a lifeline over here because, you know, they've woke up at 12 years old and the kid doesn't want the Judaism and wants everything, you know, in the public school. He's a regular kid.
But then the question is I think there are a couple of factors. One is really the home, the quality of home and Jewishness at the home. plus outside the home. I mean, in terms of education, in terms of involvement with Jewish, ideas, a Jewish concept. It's like almost like a Jewish. It's like a Jewish way. The cycle. You ever hear it, right? From the moment you're born to the moment you die, right?
I know it's 100% what you're saying, and that's really what we're saying. The home isn't there anymore. The school, the synagogue was just the extension. It was the ringing of the bell. It was the little things that people had. Okay, my Jewish friends or the synagogue. Now people say, well, I don't have anything in the home. I want the synagogue to do everything. First of all, they cut it, like I say, they don't even live near the synagogue. Child hardly ever goes there, only a few times a week for a few hours. And then, 2 hours, and then take them out of that environment for the rest of the week. And, summers, they got to go to sports camp and their extracurricular activities. And then there's nothing there, and the family didn't have it. And if there's a strong family, you're right. I mean, it's 100%. And people are relying, oh, well, I paid my dues to the synagogue. Hopefully they did everything right. And, children know the truth better than everybody else. I guess we're adults, and, people know politicians. You know how to get through life and to put on a face for people. Kids know the truth. You can't fool a kid. And the parents can say, you go to synagogue, and they think, oh, see, I sent them to synagogue. And the child says, yeah, what are you doing on Saturday, You're not, you dump me off on Saturday, and you go and you're doing your own thing. What's the child? And the parents are patting themselves on the back. Oh, I took my kid to temple. Isn't this beautiful? They're going to learn so much. And the kid is thinking, kind of hypocrisy is this? I don't want anything to do with this. And children pick this up, and that's exactly what happened in the, unfortunately, you can times this by 1 million. I mean, the biggest, go ahead.
My other question, how do we motivate people?
It's got to be from the beginning of that. A little bit, some people try the shock therapy that, this is the numbers, this is the reality of the situation. If you want Jewish things for your children, then you can't just be backseat drivers or just give them, you give soccer lessons, tennis lessons, piano lessons. Okay, I send them to Hebrew school too. Hebrew school has to be number one, the Jewish education. Again, we always put a pitch in for, the day schools, of course. And it's not just because it's our day school, but anybody would see, and our kids aren't all Orthodox. They're not all, come from committed homes. But one thing goes to another over here. That the child feels Jewish, but it's a good thing, but a lot of people feel very scared about this. They're going to come back and parents, why aren't you doing this? Now, I know people, very hard to take off. Of course, a Jewish person during Passover takes off the first 2 days and the last 2 days. Now, this is very difficult. I mean, even the Orthodox people moan and groan. They're using their vacation time, and, it's a difficult thing. And surely if they're not so committed, it's probably double, is difficult. But children sent to our day school. I said, are you going to come over for Saturday? I mean, for the holidays? And they said to me, I did a little trepidation. I didn't know for sure if they took or they didn't. Oh, I have to. I'm like, why? Well, my son learns all about it. What would it look to my son that, that he's learning all about the holidays and how it's important and not to work, and all of a sudden I go off to work. So what you have, and unfortunately you have this by a lot of parents, is that, I told, well, bring the kids over. I said, well, I know what's going to happen. The child's going to learn one thing, and I'm not doing it, and they're going to reflect on me. So instead of growing with the child, they'll say, I'm going to send my child to someplace, and they'll say, I'm a good Jew, whatever I do. And then it'll be, it goes back to the parents again. It's not even, the parents have to feel the commitment, and then the Jewish kids. And it goes with learning also.
Well, even beyond the parents, the individual, because what if you have a single individual?
The people who just want to flip through the aisles and, learn something about Judaism in their home.
And you're right, you just talk about, now I see they have these CD-ROMs, and you have all these, on the internet. I mean, I'm not familiar with the internet, but, if you want to communicate with people on various Jewish subjects, or you can learn, or even by programs where you can teach yourself, whether it's Hebrew or even
Talmud.
Talmud.
You're 100% right, and here we go with the X again. Because if people are committed to Judaism, and there are a number of people in education, they have vast storage at their fingertips. They never had such an access to Jewish. So on one hand, it's an X. If you're into it, you're on top of the world, and no one else ever had this study before. On the other hand, again, it's so paradoxical. It's so easy. It's so at their fingertips. And what did they have 100 years ago? Books were expensive. You had to go through the mud into a synagogue that was
Right.
not air conditioned. I'm sure the heat wasn't so hot anyway. I mean, I just think it was difficult, and people went. And now, people at their fingertips
Right.
could have all this knowledge, and they don't avail of themselves of
You know,
it.
I know,
It's terrible.
I know one of the first premise we're talking about with the lack of the.
Even in the whole show, the kosher industry nowadays. In the olden days, you had just a very limited amount.
Right.
I don't know what's even there's artificial, bagos or part
Right.
of that you can eat, and there's that's really not lobster, but it is. It's made out of
Right.
soybean, whatever it is. And so again, same thing. If you want to keep kosher, you're on top of the world that. They probably didn't have these taste sensations ever before,
Right.
ever that you
Right.
have.
Or they
But-
even
but,
have like I've seen like games for children, Jewish games, with
Yeah.
Jewish orientation games. Like was it like I'm not trying to like Candyland? I think it's called
Yeah,
Kosherland.
Kosherland, yeah.
I mean all these other fatal or stuffed Torah.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's so much available if you want to. There's so much in around the. We talk about the country. We didn't really talk about that, but I think it's really typical. I mean, there is so many things out there. There's resorts, totally kosher resorts that people want to go to. Vacations in Miami Beach.
It's funny where people. I know we always talk about food. I don't know how much time we have.
Just a few minutes.
Oh, quantity, but the quality is certainly there, and I think.
It's worthy to discuss it with the whole show of just the increase of the Orthodox, because that's big news in its own right. I mean, we're not old men, even though a little gray I
Right.
have. But in any case, people would say in the 1940s and 50s, and I would like to bring a few people on the show because people have to contrast what history was. If you were an Orthodox Jew or committed to Torah and mitzvahs, you were an oddball. And now you're part of the mainstream, really, and there's
Right.
so much written about that and respected in Orthodox Judaism. And it's on increase for two reasons. One, and just simply there's a high marriage rate, surely 100% in marriage in Jewish people,
Right.
but the high birth rate also. So
Right.
that's giving more Jewish people. On the other hand, you're going there downhill with, like I said, the assimilated Jews. So even if, first of all, they're intermarried, and even if people, they'll have one child, they'll have two children, even
Right.
if you are a married couple. So by the time you're done, that the irreligious community, the secular community is going down in numbers, and the religious community is going up. And this is where would be outwardly seen as people read about is the politics a lot. And in New York State, and you
Right.
see the governor, and they'll go to the Orthodox community, and they'll say, "What are you going to the Orthodox community?" People will think, and they talk about, and they write about. Well, there's just a tremendous amount of numbers there, and there's commitment, and they vote in blocks because their concern is together. But still, there is high numbers in that sense, and they are making more of a force. And like I say, the more numbers and quantity also brings in quality. But because, like I say, if there's people going to be committed to a kosher resort, well, they'll make it kosher. Listen, if there's $1 for somebody there, they're going to make it. And, it goes hand in hand. The kosher products are there. Everybody's looking to sell something. They say, hey, you got 100,000 people say, and I'm looking for a matzia, like a bargain like the next person over there. You can give me a can of tuna fish for $0.10. And if it doesn't have a kosher symbol on it, well,
Right.
I don't want it. And if
Right.
if there's 100,000 people saying the same thing, you make the best tuna fish, you can make the cheapest product, and we don't want it. Why? Because there's no kosher symbol. They'll get, hey, let's get that kosher symbol on it, and now we have an opening to a whole segment of the population. So it really is. It's an X factor. We're increasing with people committed to Judaism. On the other hand, unfortunately, we can't forget that we're losing a vast amount of Jewish people to assimilation. And that's the issue before us. If anybody has ideas how to help the Jewish community, we'd like to always take your suggestions. In the meantime, hey, have a good day. Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and together with Steve Lefkowitz, we have an interesting show for you. Steve, what are you going to talk about today?
Well, I'm not going to talk about, but maybe you can inform me, because you always hear the words. Right.
On the table there for us to talk about. Judaism has been around for 3,300 years. But saying all that, and we always say, of course, in classic Orthodox Judaism, Torah never changes.
Right.
It's the same kosher mitzvahs, the same Shabbos, the same Friday night candles that a woman's lighting. She knows that her relatives, 3,000 years in a golden chain, have never broken. Saying all that, there has been different philosophy throughout the years. Certain ways that, this is the way I talk about philosophy. There's 613 mitzvahs.
Right.
Now think of a piano. Piano is any key, number of keys. Now, when Beethoven was a genius, and Bach, you say they composed, what did they do? Found a new note, a new key on the piano? No, it's the same piano that they had before. It's the same piano that people have afterwards. But it's the arrangement of the keys. So therefore, you cannot add or subtract mitzvahs. Let's make that 100% clear. But the emphasis could be on different things. And the Baal Shem Tov came on the scene about 200 years ago in the middle 1700s. And there's a little bit of historical. We can't go into everything. We'll make everything a little bit short and brief. The Jewish people in the 1600s had tremendous rise. Well, they were living in Eastern Europe really all the way through up till World War II. And the Chelminsky, not to go into the whole history here, there was tremendous riots, pogroms. The numbers fade compared to the Holocaust, 100,000 Jews. But on one hand, it was in a way a little bit worse. First of all, the Jewish people had to pick themselves up again. Nowadays, after the Holocaust, not saying about the people who died, they're dead, but the Jewish community as a whole always had America.
Yeah.
And enough, America built itself up. And even the survivors went to Israel, and we know Israel surely built itself up. In those times, there was no social programs. There was no highest, people know the joint distribution, all these programs to help the Jewish people out. And they were just beaten to the ground, and they really couldn't get up. So on one hand, the numbers didn't say it, but it really was a tremendous depression amongst the Jewish people. Education was a low level. Nowadays, you say there's public schools. There's even Jewish schools. They have scholarships. People really don't go lacking for a Jewish education for the most part. The synagogues let people in. In those days, that there was no teacher. They were in the villages sometimes. They didn't have money, so there was a tremendous ignorance of Judaism. Everybody thinks, they were such scholars 100 years ago. It really wasn't true. It's too romantic to say that. Everybody knew about Judaism. Maybe they knew about Sabbath. They knew they were a Jewish identity, but they knew the inner learning. That's not true at all. And that's where the Baal Shem Tov came on the scene. He said that it's important for every Jewish person to serve the Almighty out of happiness, number one, because they have a special privilege in doing the Torah and the mitzvahs, the commandments. And number two, that everybody is important in Hashem's eyes, the Almighty's eyes, even if they're not learned, which was very big radical news, because before it was like, if you're a scholar, you're a rabbi, you're important. If you're ignoramus, you're illiterate in Hebrew, well, what's an illiterate person? Just a very second-class citizen. And so there's people were feeling that Baal Shem Tov is not true at all. It's what's in the heart that counts. A person could be a scholar, and he's just going through logical gymnastics and saying, I'm a great scholar. So what are you doing? You're just learning it like you're learning a logic book, even though it may be the Gemara and maybe the Talmud. And here's a simple person with his whole heart cries out to the Almighty. They're on top of the world. And so people heard this, they lit up. They heard this news that they're important and their prayers mean something. It really took the Jewish people out of a general quagmire of just feeling depressed, and it really raised their spirits up.
Now, where was the Baal Shem Tov located?
Really,
where did he live?
Yeah, Central Europe. Could be like where Czechoslovakia is, in that area. I mean, the border's always changing.
And this took place around when?
Middle 1700s, he came on the scene. And he had many followers, simply amongst the masses. Actually, it says by the early 1800s, half of Eastern Europe was really Hasidic. I mean, just a movement of 50 years really turned over the whole area in the region. He, in turn, had many major, when we talk about students, and you'll hear that in the Talmud, they don't mean 10-year-old students, instead students of disciples. They spread out, and in turn, they went to different regions around. Again, it was an Eastern European movement for the most part. There were centers, let us say this, in Israel. Many people get this wrong. The Zionist movement all started in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. But the Hasidim always, every Jewish people felt about Israel all even beforehand. They made settlements, and there's very old communities, especially in Jerusalem, that go back hundreds of years. But it was mainly in the Eastern Europe section that Hasidus went on fire. And they, the Lubavitch, as you were asking, the Chabad movement was one segment of the Hasidic movement. Chabad is an acronym, if you know Hebrew, Chacham being das, which means wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. I mean, he took a step further from the Baal Shem. Baal Shem Tov says everybody could serve the Almighty. They had the power. They were a Jewish person. The Alter Rebbe, I mean, the first Lubavitch Rebbe taught how everybody could do it. You have to understand things. You have to understand the mystical techniques they had in the world. Now, that's also a big revolution in Jewish thought. Beforehand, there was always mysticism, but it was only kept to the top scholars.
What is that called?
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah simply means, they always use the word like some mystical, really means accepting, is tradition. And that's exactly the point, that there was few people that always handed down from one top scholars to the other.
Right.
But it wasn't just given over to the mass. They didn't have mass classes in it.
Right.
And then Baal Shem Tov says, you know what's going to revolutionize Judaism? People have to learn the secrets. What is really a Jewish person? What about his soul? What is his connection to Hashem? Can't just say the dry mitzvahs of stand up here, sit down here, don't light a fire on Sabbath, don't do this, stand up, sit down. It's too dry. People have to know, what are we really doing with our deeper commitment to Judaism? What is a mitzvah? What's really this godly force in the world through our prayers? So this is why it lit up many Jewish people also. But the first Lubavitch Rebbe taught that you have to understand these things also. And that was very big news also, that you can understand the deeper aspects of Judaism. And many scholars came. It wasn't just a lot of people I know in history books will say, well, it was an ignoramus march, masses that came to Hasidim. It wasn't true. A lot of great scholars came also to try to understand this new way of thinking.
I understand. So you have the Lubavitch, what's the Alter Rebbe?
The Alter Rebbe, we'll deal with this one for a second. Like I say...
What is meant by a dynasty?
Well, for the most part, he had his court. And in Lubavitch, they didn't have a strong royal court. We'll go into other, like Hasidic groups in a second. But it just meant that the leadership handed down to one son after another, till the Rebbe was the seventh Lubavitch Rebbe.
Right.
Menachem
Schneerson.
And that's what means dynasty, because of that. But he had his followers, and the followers would go to his son, and afterwards he went to White Russia, which was a very thinking place, as Vilna, Lithuania. In any case, that's why they needed a thinking. They can't just say believe and feel good. They wanted a thought, and it really turned them on a lot. Really, most of Russian Jewry before... Again, now here in Russia, had a different answer. We talked about the Holocaust before in Eastern Europe. Of course, the other major story in Eastern Europe was the Russian Revolution, the Communist Revolution. So obviously, and we don't have to go into a major history, everybody knows that put really a cap on not only Hasidic thought, on Jewish thought, closed up synagogues, and most people know the general idea of what happened. So that put a halt really to Jewish life. It's only to the credit of the Lubavitch movement that always had underground cells of teaching Judaism. And now that it's a free Russia, hopefully it'll remain that way with all the things, the turmoil, but at least right now it's open and people have freedom of religion, that they found that now the people came out of the woodwork and there really were underground cells teaching Judaism, keeping it alive in some small way. Actually, there's still a lot of ignorance in Russia, coming from 70 years, whatever, of communism. But
so, just a quick thing. So you have what I asked the question, Satmar. So that's what.
Right,
then there's one.
Rebbe just passed away in Israel. What happened was, and I pretty much started from the before, that there was many groups and they branched out.
Right.
These great leaders, and like I said, the Lubavitch group. Well, Lubavitch is a small little town in Russia.
Oh,
that's where the name. That's Lubavitch, and all these names are also. That's where they're all from. Belz, you never heard of them because they're very small cities. Ger, it was a suburb of Warsaw. Bovov, it's just Russian and.
Oh, I see. They're all from little villages or towns.
Yeah, that's all these names for the most part. Only like I said was Chabad. Chabad is like a thought, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But everywhere, one of the other ones are little cities in Europe. That's really all it was. And different groups had different, little bit different customs, a little different. The main thing that they followed a different Rebbe. The Rebbe was a focal point. I mean, we didn't get into the purpose of the Rebbe. All of a sudden, there was a
Right.
Rebbe, a strong central figure. Well, he was a righteous person, and
Right.
he would teach, as we said with the Lubavitch custom, was to teach a lot,
Right.
and also to give blessings and guidance. So people would go to their Rebbe for guidance, and it just was a really, again, 1900, you could see a strong assimilation, unfortunately, even amongst the Hasidic groups. I mean, it was just now the Enlightenment came out, people were just accepted in the world.
Right.
Again, it's an important history that we're going really too briefly here about Jewish life in the 1800s and early 1900s. But in any case, these are small groups, and really the common, well, we said Lubavitch was really, that made it during the Communist Revolution. Other ones obviously weren't in Poland and the other groups, but now we know that, of course, the Holocaust took care of these other Hasidic
But
groups.
why is it seems, you know, that the Lubavitch gets...
Another part of the philosophy we haven't talked about, and that in a way was Ahavas Yisrael, the love of another Jewish person. If every Jewish person is essentially a Jewish person, we said it doesn't matter how much he knows or how much he does, essentially they're Jewish people, and that's the Baal Shem Tov taught us. What, really, I'm important, really? You know, and that's the turned on people. Well, taking that a step further, then it's incumbent upon another person to take care of another Jewish person. So the Jewish community in general, and especially surely the Orthodox community, tend to be cliquish because they were afraid of outsiders. Like I said, and they had a right to, let's say that way, because if they really wanted to keep their, you know, religious community strong, like I said, there was a lot of outside forces trying to penetrate them and taking away a lot of people. So they built up almost like barriers around themselves, like we better take care of our own. Where Lubavitch never felt this way, and they just, again, with the Rebbe's guidance constantly, because it took a lot of guidance, they say, well, no, we're strong. You understand. Remember, we told you have to understand. You have a strong commitment. You know what's right or wrong.
So they were big also on outreach?
Very big on outreach, but never took the proportions it does in this present era after World War II. Because before it was teaching, you know, people knew something. It was just to strengthen them in their Judaism. Here in Lubavitch nowadays, had to really go to the college campuses where, you know, there's the students maybe in college, and of course that means they're smart and all that, etc.
Right.
On the other hand, their Jewish learning was on the level of a second grader. You know, remember, oh, Noah and his Ark and fairy tales, and almost that's what their level of Jewish education was. So it was a whole different aspect, but it's modern day, but really it's essentially the same situation. Well, they're Jewish and they're important. I mean, people say, well, they're important, they're a doctor, a lawyer, but in a Jewish sense, they're like, they're assimilated from the Jewish community, but still they're a Jewish person.
What's so special about 770 on Eastern Parkway?
In his own right, because he was the Rebbe when 1920, which obviously that should tell you 1920 in Russia wasn't a place for a religious Jew. It wasn't for any Jewish person to be. Was under the communist regime. And he actually, and it's a whole story in its own right, and again, just saying everything very briefly, he was actually imprisoned by the communists in 1927 and tortured, and eventually miraculously let out of jail. And then he went from there to Warsaw, Poland, and again from 1930, and we all know what happened in 1940. So in 1940, he had to leave miraculously again to America. And he set up his headquarters in 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. That's where the Rebbe's always wanted to be, where the center of the action is, so to speak. And Russia really was. People don't understand it, but before the Communist Revolution, the center of Judaism was really in Russia. Really afterwards, people know about Poland because they had so many numbers. You know, people all went to Poland and built up because Russia, by, you know, after 20 years of having Stalinistic communism clamp down on them, obviously there wasn't too much of, you know, Jewish learning, anything. I mean, maybe underground, like I said, but surely not on the surface. It was totally illegal. So Poland, people know Polish Jewry, but Russia was the center of Jewish life. In Poland and Russia, in any case. And America really, even till today, has the majority of Jewish people. Not the majority, I shouldn't say that the most Jewish people, even though Israel's creeping up on it. What are they up to? Israel's about 4.5 million Jews, and America's kind of 5.5 million. Israel's creeping up, but even till today, you know, surely then, when 6 million, there was 500,000 in Israel.
But what is that, like, so then you have, what, 770, and then you have, like, Crown Heights. What is Crown Heights?
Well, Crown Heights is just the area. I don't know, a lot of, from New York, if people know New York, you know, you have Canarsie, Brighton Beach,
So that's just a section of
Crown
Brooklyn.
Heights is just a section. But no, people,
Okay.
older people to come over to me, oh, I know Crown Heights. It was actually a very luxurious section. You know, people, you know, maybe our grandfather's age, you know, the seniors' age, that they'll tell you if they know about, oh, Crown Heights was a beautiful section.
Right.
And you could see the beautiful buildings there still today. Of course, you know, other people have moved into it and they have problems. And, you know, that's maybe worth the show of what's, you know, life in Crown Heights today. But maybe we should interview someone from Crown Heights when they come up, because that was big in the news. But on the other hand, that, you know, it holds on. It's a section, Judaism. Borough Park's your major Jewish area. I mean, there's a lot of other Jewish areas, but for Lubavitch, they're the only ones who stayed there, really, in Crown Heights.
In the Crown Heights. Now, what do they call them? Shalush, like emissaries? Or what?
Shluchim.
Shluchim.
Emissaries. Well, that's what you can't wait for people to come to you. You have to go, again, like I say, where the actions, where the Jewish people are. So the Rebbe, really in the 60s, and then it built up in the 70s, and then it snowballed, really, in the 80s and 90s. I don't think there's a Jewish community in America. Well, actually, any. I'm just saying, maybe I know there's in Montana, you know, there's a few Jews. I shouldn't say any, but any somewhat significance. There's not a Lubavitcher there, and it's built up. I mean, you'd say 20 years ago there was nobody in Albany, and now, you know, and the Rebbe Reuben came, and, you know, he's built it up. And, you know, just little by little, Lubavitchers come, and they built up, and have gotten a lot of friends. Lubavitch, on the other hand, like myself, you know, beard, they look a little different or religious, and that's not according to people's, you know, way of thinking. On the other hand, like that, a sense of loving another Jewish person, willing to help whenever people need it, and willing to educate. And like we already talked about many times, people, you know, come to us and saying, oh, my child, and they're having problems with drugs, or they're assimilating, you know, what's my child is turned off. And they know we're there to come to. And, you know, innovative programs. We work with Hebrew schools. I'm just talking about in this area, which, again, you can extrapolate further to other areas. That the matzahs over here, we make matzahs with Hebrew school, other Hebrew school kids, and say, oh, you're pretty nice. People in the news now, the Chabad movement in Israel is taking care of the Chernobyl children. A lot of Jews in the Chernobyl area and the nuclear blast, and it has a major, probably has a major effect on everybody. We won't talk about that. I mean, again, that's worthy a show in its own right. These are all major issues. Yeah, but children really affected it more, the nuclear problems, and they flew them out. Of course, everything's money. You know, you fly children out, you got to set them up in Israel. And Chabad dealt with this, and they've actually had about 1,300 children they flew out of Chernobyl area, you know, since that blast happened. So people then start saying, you know, maybe they're not religious, but saying, hey, that's beautiful. You know, you know, what, you know, this is the greatest thing. So Spielberg, I know Steven Spielberg got caught up. I mean, people who are not Orthodox and even non-Jewish people saying, well, this is great, you know, helping children come from a nuclear, you know, area where there's problems.
Right.
You know, who can argue with this? You know, who can argue? If you're nice to somebody, no one's going to be your enemy.
Right.
And that's really what Lubavitch says. We're not real. We have our ways. I mean, we are Orthodox in that sense, and we are Hasidic, and even that people are looking for. When we talked about the mysticism, people are looking for a spiritual nature. And they're saying, hey, I want something spiritual in their lives. Unfortunately, sometimes they go to other religions. But on the other hand, they go, hey, you know, you're Hasidic. I hear, you know, like you say, Kabbalah, Hasidic. I read somewhere. You know, teach me something spiritual. So we got people coming because of that over here. So it builds up.
So you have many programs.
Many faceted programs. Anyway, Hebrew, Yiddish, mysticism, Gemara, Talmud. And, you know, and we just ask for people to keep an open mind. We don't shove it down anybody's throat. And people like us for that. You know, we just educate. That's what we're here, even on the Jewish View. Just to educate. This is what we're here, suggesting, educating, telling about Jewish ideas if they want to catch on to it, you know, and learn more. You know, you say in Yiddish, gesundheit, you know, you should be healthy, you know, that's good. We're willing to teach. And if not, we're happy. You know, we put up a Hanukkah menorah. What's that for? We put a Hanukkah menorah, and we have to put one up in the capital. I know that other capitals in the area, and we do have permission for that, and that will be a project, you know, to put one up. So look for that, everybody. But, you know, just an awareness of, hey, it's Hanukkah. You know, it's not that hard. You know, a lot of people, I don't know how many people I went to and say, you know, hey, it's Hanukkah. Did you light a menorah? Do you have a box of candy? Ooh, today's Hanukkah, Rabbi. Oh, you know, to me, you know, to you and me, maybe to Jewish-minded people, of course it's Hanukkah. Look on your Jewish calendar. You got it hang. You know, it's like the obvious thing, but so many people just think, oh, Hanukkah. Oh, today's the fourth day of Hanukkah. You know, what are you doing? You know, it's Hanukkah. But that's all sometimes it is also just to help people, making them awareness. Surely on campus they lose it, because they always dependent on their parents.
Yeah.
You know, Hanukkah, the father brings out the menorah. Now, who's there Friday night? The mother lights candles, and there's not too much reminders on campuses. But that's where we fit in, you know, and people just, they attach themselves a little bit. And at least they respect us, I think, wherever Lubavitch is, and that's why it's growing.
Well, I think you do a wonderful work, and I think a great asset, you know, for the Capital District, and I think we're quite fortunate in having...
A very major issue also. I mean, they see we're talking about ultra-Orthodox. They say, well, we know, you know, or they don't know. They read one line somewhere, oh, the women are second-class citizens. So that's, again, a major
I know,
myth that
I
we
just
have to
saw
dispel.
your wife was down in Brooklyn to attend, what, an international...
Liberated in our circles, you know, I stayed home with the kids, and they go off for weekends over here. You know, where do you find that so much? So really, in that sense, you know, women are we'd like to say they're even more liberated. They are very respected, and they have a lot of influence in the community, again, in teaching and talking to people, and, you know, it's really an important job. So, again, to breaking down the barriers is really what the Hasidic movement has to do today. They don't bite anybody's nose off. And
Do you have any special projects, you know, that we're focusing on, that you plan to focus
you know, like
on?
right now, there's so many things really, and really we have a finger in any pot. I mean, of course, we work with the day school #1, and we work, like I told you, with the Hebrew schools. I mentioned even just a little
Right.
briefly, but campus is actually a major function that we have to work with because of that outreach. A lot of times people put programs. Well, you know, it's in the paper. We put it out. Who's going to read them? You got to almost
Right.
go up to a person saying, "Hey, here it is."
Right.
So the campus outreach is really a major focus that we'd like to get more and more with. Really, it should even need a few full-time. I mean, really, you're talking about SUNY Albany, and we brought, you know, students, and maybe we should bring in more again, just tell us what Jewish life is. And, you know, some say 5,000 Jewish students. Now, that's a whole community. You'd have 5,000 Jewish people in an area. You
Right.
know, really, I think that's the Jewish population of Schenectady. You know, and you got 3 synagogues there. You got a whole Schenectady JCC. You know, 5,000 Jewish people
Right.
is a real whole community.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
And so here at SUNY, what do you have? Well, a part-time this, a part-time that. There you got 3 full-time rabbis. You know, whatever denomination you are, but there are 3 full-time rabbis working.
Yeah.
Like I say, a whole JCC, a beautiful campus, you know, and et cetera, working, so many things. And, you know, that's what I'm saying. It's really undermanaged, really, of how much Jewish life there really should be. And they're energetic. They're young people, but they have to be gone to. They have to have programs. They have to be reminded. They have to have fun programs. You can bring in a band. We do that every circus. You know, we try to reach them without, you know, compromising our standards, but you love to have
Right.
music and dancing and fun and, you know, Friday night parties and things like that. And kids do respond. We have more and more numbers. But unfortunately, you know, what our motto is, we're not finished till we get everyone. You know, if there's one Jewish person, again, that's the philosophy we talked about. What do you mean? There's one Jewish person. That person has to be dealt with, has to be educated, has to be turned on. You know, it has to be connected.
I know I've seen where you have, like, pizza parties.
Yeah, we'll try anything. You know, I have bagel night and pizza parties, ice cream night. Oh, what are you? That's a rabbi. Listen, if people are going to come, you know, and again, we don't want to compromise our Judaism, but there's nothing
No.
compromising having a pizza party. You know that.
And I tell you something, the pizza is delicious.
Yeah, see that.
Excellent.
You try, you know, you try to meet people. You have to think of new ways because there's so much stimulation. Everybody knows that, you know, with I mean, the television we're on, how many channels on cable, of course, is the most important one. But but there is so much stimulation. Movies. I mean, so we're talking about 100 years ago. Who had this? Who had radios? Who had television? Who had telephones? Who had internets? Who had, you know? I mean, it's incredible. And so you can't just say, and now we're going to talk about Judaism. You know, you got to make it fun. You got to make it visual, and there's a lot of work
Right.
being done in that. It surely doesn't connect to what Hollywood and, you know, what they're doing out there, you know, with the mass media.
Yeah.
But little by little, it's getting there. You know, we're trying to bring Judaism into the modern age.
I know you're doing a lot, you know, here in the, like I said, in the Capital District.
Because it's always you know, a lot of people hear about it, but it's so fuzzy in people's minds who they are. They see someone with a fur hat or something, you know,
Right.
the Streimels, which is a custom, once I'm bringing it out, is a custom from Europe. And they'd like to learn, but they don't know if they're going to be accepted. And really just, again, an open invitation that friendly and very willing to teach.
Well, are we out of time?
just almost about that. Well, we only have a brief history, but we'll have to talk about it, I guess,
Okay.
in future shows. So you know what I always say, stay tuned, and
Right.
we'll always be teaching something else over here.